Before time began, there was a belief, an idea that shaped the course of human history. For centuries, many have argued, debated, and even fought over one fundamental question: is Islam a false religion? At first glance, countless critics have pointed fingers, accusing Islam of historical inaccuracies, contradictions, and moral failures. They claim it lacks continuity, and some even say it's just a copy of other religions that came before. But today, we're going to challenge this assumption. Let's start with the most common argument: Islam revises history. Critics claim that the Quran falsely presents figures like Moses, Solomon, and Abraham as Muslims, despite their appearances in older texts like the Torah and the Bible. They argue that this alone discredits Islam, but what if we're missing something deeper here? What if these shared stories aren't proof of plagiarism, but rather a common thread that connects all divine revelations? A truth that transcends time and culture. To understand this, we must look beyond surface-level arguments. While it's true that the Quran presents these figures as Muslims, the word Muslim itself simply means one who submits to the will of God. When we look at the essence of Abraham's, Moses, and Solomon's lives, we see individuals devoted to a singular purpose: submission to the will of the Creator. This submission isn't exclusive to Islam, but Islam asserts that its teachings represent the most complete and final form of this submission. So, is Islam really revising history, or is it claiming to fulfill it? Another major point critics raise is the theological difference between Islam and Christianity, especially around the nature of Jesus. Many say that because Jesus is portrayed differently in Islam, it proves the two faiths cannot both be right. In Christianity, Jesus is God incarnate, while Islam views him as a prophet, a messenger, but not divine. This, they argue, is an irreconcilable difference. But here's where the conversation deepens. Islam doesn't deny Jesus' greatness. In fact, it elevates him as one of the most important prophets, born of a miraculous virgin birth, a figure who performed miracles and will return at the end of time. What Islam rejects is the notion of divine plurality, the idea that God can be divided into different persons. Islam insists on the absolute oneness of God, a concept known as Tawhid. This theological stance doesn't diminish Jesus' significance but instead reaffirms the belief in the undivided nature of God. In a world filled with human interpretations and cultural shifts, Islam's emphasis on monotheism remains an anchor of consistency. Could this strict adherence to monotheism be a reflection of the purity of faith that transcends human understanding? Let's address another critical point: Muhammad's life. Detractors often highlight aspects of his life, especially his marriage to Aisha, to argue that his actions were immoral. They ask, how could someone like this be a prophet? But to understand Muhammad, we need to view him in the full context of his time and culture. In 7th century Arabia, life was drastically different from today. What might seem controversial or unethical by modern standards was not only accepted but also necessary for survival and the continuity of communities. This doesn't excuse or justify every action by today's standards, but it reminds us that morality is often shaped by context. Moreover, Muslims believe that Muhammad was a man, not divine, and that his life was a model of both human struggle and ultimate submission to God's will. His flaws make him relatable, not discreditable. The final critique we'll explore is the Quran itself. Critics argue that the Quran is simply a copy of earlier religious texts, borrowing heavily from the Bible and the Torah. It's true that many of the stories in the Quran are familiar to those who've read previous scriptures, but does that make them less valuable? Or could it be that the Quran is reinforcing these eternal truths for a different audience, in a different time? The Quran describes itself as a confirmation of the previous scriptures, not their replacement. It speaks to a people who had strayed from the original message, offering guidance and clarity where confusion had crept in. And there's one point we cannot overlook. Many argue that Islam's later emergence in the 7th century is suspicious. If this is the final, most complete revelation, why did it take so long to arrive? But consider this: could it be that Islam came at exactly the right moment? A time when humanity was in need of a reminder, a course correction? Islam's teachings brought a sense of unity, purpose, and moral guidance to a fractured world. It addressed social injustices, human rights, and the treatment of women, topics that were often overlooked or ignored by the dominant cultures of the time. As we come full circle, the question lingers: is Islam a false religion? After examining the evidence, the stories, the theology, and the historical context, it becomes clear that the criticisms leveled against Islam aren't as concrete as they first appear. In fact, many of these points reveal the depth, complexity, and consistency of Islamic teachings. Islam isn't trying to rewrite history, it's attempting to fulfill it. It's not creating a new religion, it's restoring an eternal truth that has been with humanity from the beginning. The truth is that Islam's emphasis on submission to one God, its recognition of previous prophets, and its focus on social justice are values that resonate deeply, even today. For many, Islam offers clarity in a world filled with noise, a straightforward path toward understanding the divine. So, is Islam false? No, it's not. It's a continuation of the same search for truth that has existed since the dawn of time. The question isn't whether Islam is false, but rather, are we willing to open our minds to understand it fully? Islam, like all faiths, invites us to question, seek, and ultimately, find the truth. And that truth may be far more profound than we initially imagined. And there are many things to cover, and trust me, my friend, hit the subscribe button because what's coming next will literally shock you.